Hey everyone, it's Chase Elleby and Joel Williams here at Williams Elleby, and today we're going to answer the question, so my case is settled, when do I get paid? Always get that question, how long does it take to get the check in? So Joel, hypothetical, I get off the phone with defense counsel, we've agreed to settle the case for $100,000. What happens next?
The check gets ordered.
Okay, so right, the check has to get ordered. Does the check come directly to us? Where does it go?
Oh, I got you. Yeah. So typically the first thing that happens is the defense counsel will go ahead and order a draft of the check from the insurance company. That can take anywhere from a week to 2 months. I mean, 2 months is a bit extreme, but usually I'd say between 2 and 4 weeks is how long it takes to get the check in. But during that time frame, usually the attorneys are kicking back paperwork and dealing with what we call a release, where the plaintiff says, by accepting this money, I agree to never sue you for this incident again, basically with some other language in there, but you're kind of working out the language of that release. Yeah,
so when you agree on an amount, the check has to get ordered. So this is think of the scenario where you've been in litigation for a while, both sides sort of know what's going on, and you finally settle on that number. It usually takes a little bit for the check to get ordered because the insurance company ordered the check goes to defense counsel is preparing the releases, and then they send everything over. So that usually, like Joel said, takes 4 weeks, give or take. Now there's also certain situations, let's say on the pre-suit side, where we send the demand and we say, you've got 30 days to settle this case and send the check. If you don't, we're going to try to pop you for bad faith. Well, that check comes almost instantly. They'll overnight it, FedEx it, whatever they need to do to make sure that the check is received by the terms of that demand. So in that setting, the check comes in a lot quicker. So, all right, so we talked about when the check comes in. We talked about sort of the paperwork that comes along with the check. What's sort of the next thing that we do to try to make sure everything gets finalized?
So I don't know if it's the next thing, but it's something that kind of coincides with what's going on during this roughly month time frame, and that is checking to make sure there are no hospital liens, anybody that needs to be paid back out of the proceeds from the settlement, because we don't want to wait until we get the check and then start checking around on that stuff. We want to get all that stuff figured out, like who's got to be paid out of this money before the check arrives, so that once the check arrives, we can do the disbursement and the client can get paid as quickly as possible.
Right. So an example would be, let's say there's a $50,000 hospital lien. We'll have known that once the case gets resolved. So once we know the amount that the case is settled for, call the hospital up or the attorney working for the hospital saying, hey, you got this hospital lien for $50,000. Will you take $35,000? And so we're trying to negotiate that down to get the actual number that needs to be paid out of the settlement. And most of the time you have to know what the settlement value is to negotiate liens, because most of the folks who hold these liens are not going to want to negotiate until they know the details of what the settlement is. So
yeah, and I think a lot of times, I know people get frustrated a lot with how long it takes to actually get their money once their case settles. But one of the biggest hurdles that we do run into are things that are beyond our control. Like if we know there's a hospital lien, sending letters, sending faxes, sending emails, making phone calls, just trying to get somebody on the phone that has authority to actually negotiate this bill or lien with us takes forever, most of the time. Sometimes you get lucky and people will negotiate with you fairly fast, but especially when it's a bigger healthcare institution or TRICARE or Medicare or any kind of government-based program that has to be paid back, well, we probably don't have to tell you, because if you've ever tried to get an answer from the government about something, it takes forever. And so that can cause some delay, and it doesn't necessarily mean that your attorney is not diligently working to try to get the case dispersed or get the money dispersed. It may just mean that they're having some difficulty getting a final payback number on some of those liens. But they should communicate that to you, right? I know it's frustrating if you don't know what's going on. You just think the money's sitting there and nobody's doing anything about it. But that may be something, and hopefully if that becomes an issue, your attorney's going to clearly communicate with you and let you know, hey, we're running into an issue with Medicare, but we're working to get that resolved.
Yeah, and sometimes too, like as a hospital lien, for instance, sometimes if you're asking for a big reduction based on the settlement amount, it usually has to be run up the chain of authority to even get that approval. So it might take, you know, a month to hear from the CFO of a big, you know, hospital system to agree on a pretty substantial reduction. So, all right, so we talked about getting the check in. We talked about getting the releases squared away, paying off any liens. So the last sort of, you know, bit that I always kind of group together is the settlement statement and then the dismissal. So why don't you explain what the settlement statement is?
Are you going to give me the hard one? You going to take the easy one? Just
Right.
dismiss the case?
That's right.
Okay, a settlement statement is basically a document that you should get from your attorney at the end of the case that shows you where every dollar goes, right? So it should list out the total amount of your settlement. Say it's the $100,000 that Chase talked about earlier, then it'll show how much you're paying in attorney's fees and expenses, which can include anything from copies to expert witness fees to medical records and any amount of money that the attorney advances on your behalf. Then there'll be a section if you have to pay any liens back, like Medicare, Medicaid, health insurance, hospital liens, anything like that. It'll show you how much is being paid back to them and then your net recovery. So the goal with a settlement statement is to be as transparent as possible so you see where every penny goes and that you approve of where every penny goes before the final disbursement.
Yeah, that's right. And for us especially, if there's anything that needs to be paid back, say a hospital lien, you know, health insurance, Medicare, anything like that, we always give our clients copies of the letters and the checks that we send and mail on their behalf to those providers. So,
yeah.
So once the settlement statement's signed, the releases are signed and all that, the last thing to do is, if the case is in litigation, is just to file the dismissal. And like Joel said, I get the easy one, and the dismissal is just that. You draft a pleading that says we are now dismissing this case with prejudice in most instances, and you file it with the court, and then the case is done. So,
so all in all, your case settles. The point of this video is to help you understand that you're not going to get paid that day or the
Right.
next day.
right.
Even if you're at a mediation, the insurance company doesn't come with a checkbook and say, all right, well, we're going to pay $100,000, here's your check.
Right.
The check is mailed to the law firm. Once it's ordered, it's mailed to the law firm. During the time that the lawyers are waiting on the check to get there, there's things going on like negotiations on release language, negotiations with lien holders and bill holders and all that. So hopefully, in the ideal world, by the time the check gets here, all those other things are handled. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, that for reasons that may or may not be within your attorney's control. And then once the check gets there, it's deposited into the attorney's trust account. The money is then dispersed from that after the settlement statement is approved by the client. And then the dismissal can be filed simultaneously with the disbursement. But I'd say on average it's like what, a month to 2 months, depending on how long it takes to negotiate with the lien holders and how long it takes for the check to come in.
Yeah.
So if your attorney's taken up to a month or 45 days or even 60 days sometimes, that's not something that should send off alarm signals and bells and whistles and make you start thinking that your attorney's trying to steal money from you.
No, not at all. And I will add too, you got to keep in mind that attorneys don't get paid until our clients get paid. Right. So we're incentivized as well to try to get the case, you know, resolved and dispersed as soon as possible. So just know that too, when it's taking a little bit longer than what you anticipate, that everyone's on the same page as far as trying to get the case resolved. So
that's right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we hope this video has been helpful to you. If so, give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, or we will see you next week.